I shook my nephew's hand the morning he moved in to help me. Thought I was the luckiest man in Tennessee. Turns out I was handing him the combination to everything I'd spent 38 years building, and he already knew exactly what he was going to do with it. My name is Gerald Mack. I'm 74 years old. Retired electrician, master license, worked every job from new construction to hospital rewiring across 3 counties in Middle Tennessee. 38 years, I kept the lights on for other people. Never lost a man on a job site. Never had a callback on an install that failed. I was proud of that, the way a man gets proud of things that quietly define him, things nobody sees but that hold everything else up. I live in a brick ranch house on Cordell Lane in Murfreesboro. Small yard, big porch, the kind of neighborhood where the same families have been waving at each other across driveways since the Carter administration. My wife Elaine picked the house. She said the porch was wide enough to grow old on. She was right about that. She was right about most things. Elaine had her first stroke in the spring. A Thursday morning, she was making coffee, and I heard the mug hit the floor. By the time the ambulance left our driveway, something between us had shifted in a way I knew wasn't shifting back. The neurologist at Vanderbilt used careful, measured words. Significant event. Residual weakness. Cognitive changes over time. I sat in that office and translated every phrase into what it actually meant for the woman waiting back in room 4 and for the man who was going to drive her home. She came back to Cordell Lane 6 days later. Slower, softer, easily confused by things that had never confused her before. She knew me perfectly. She knew our daughters. But tasks that used to take her 10 minutes now took an hour. And some days she lost the thread of a conversation mid-sentence and looked at me with this small, searching expression, like she was standing in a room she recognized but couldn't quite name. I became her whole schedule. Her medications at 6, her exercises at 9, her rest after lunch, her good hours in the late afternoon when she'd sit with me on that wide porch and watch the light change over the yard. I stopped taking jobs. I stopped most everything. I didn't mind. I want you to understand that clearly. I did not mind a single bit of it. But I also want to be honest with you, the way a man can only be honest when he's already on the other side of the worst of it. I was exhausted in a way I couldn't even measure anymore. The kind of tired that stops feeling like tiredness and just becomes the permanent texture of your days. That was the condition I was in when my nephew Derek called. He was my younger sister, Patricia's boy. 36 years old, worked in sales, lived up in Clarksville. We weren't close exactly, but we were family, the kind that shows up at holidays and funerals and doesn't ask too much of each other in between. He called on a Tuesday evening, and his voice had that warm, deliberate quality of someone who'd rehearsed just enough. Uncle Gerald. I heard about Aunt Elaine. I've been thinking about you both. I've got some flexibility right now, and I want to come help. I'm not asking you to say yes. I'm telling you I need to do this. Friends, I am a man who spent nearly 4 decades reading job sites for hidden problems. Load-bearing walls, faulty conduit, the weak point in a system that looks solid until it fails all at once. I thought I could read people the same way I read a blueprint. I thought I'd know if something was off. I cried on that phone call. First time in years. Just held the receiver and couldn't find a single word because I'd been alone with it for so long. And here was family. Here was someone coming. And I thought, she always said Derek had good in him. Elaine had spent 15 years defending that boy to a family that mostly raised an eyebrow at him. And here he was, exactly when it mattered. He moved into the spare bedroom at the end of the month. And I need you to stop right here with me, because everything I'm about to describe, all the help he gave, all the weight he lifted, I need you to hold it next to one fact I didn't learn until much later. Derek had called the bank 2 days before he called me. He already knew the number in that account before he ever asked how Elaine was doing. But I didn't know that. So let me tell you what I saw, because what I saw was convincing enough to fool a man who thought he knew how things failed. Derek learned Elaine's routine inside a week. He took the pharmacy runs to the Walgreens on Medical Center Parkway. He drove her to her Thursday appointments at the rehab clinic over on Northwest Broad. He learned the names of her nurses, asked the right questions, wrote things down in a little notebook like he was serious about it. Her neurologist told me once, not many families step up like this. I stood there nodding with my whole chest full of gratitude. He took the insurance calls. He handled the mail. He took the grocery runs to the Kroger on Old Fort Parkway and always brought back the brand of peppermint tea Elaine liked, the specific one in the green box, without ever being asked twice. And I thanked God for him every single night. Here's what I didn't know. He was memorizing every number he ever touched. About 3 months in, Elaine had a hard stretch. 4 bad days in a row, confused and frightened, calling out for her mother, who'd been gone 20 years. Couldn't remember taking her medication 20 minutes after she'd taken it. I hadn't slept more than 3 hours at a stretch in 2 weeks, and for the first time in my adult life I missed a bill. 38 years, perfect record, 1 missed payment. Derek came by on a Wednesday evening and sat across from me at the kitchen table. He had a folder. He set it down the way a man sets something down when he's been thinking about this exact moment for a while. Uncle Gerald, I need to talk to you about something hard, and I need you to really hear me. He had a way of speaking, unhurried, gentle, like each sentence had been thought through just long enough that it didn't sound rehearsed. Like a man who'd studied where your fear lived and was handing it back to you folded into concern. You're 74. Aunt Elaine is 69. If something happens to you tomorrow, God forbid, and everything's in your name, her life freezes while lawyers sort it out. She'd be sitting in this house, not able to touch a dollar during the worst time of her life. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to make sure she's protected. Every word landed exactly where I was most afraid. Like he'd been in the room at 3 a.m. reading the specific fears I hadn't said out loud to another living soul. He opened the folder slowly. No rush. Giving me room. These are durable power of attorney documents, he said. It just means I can handle the financial and medical side completely if you can't. The accounts, the bills, her care decisions, so you can put every single thing you have into being here for her. You're carrying too much, Uncle Gerald. Let me take this part. My eyes were burning, my hands were stiff. I had that specific bone-deep tiredness that doesn't live in your muscles, the kind that gets into your judgment, into the part of your mind that's supposed to slow down and read carefully before you sign your name to something. I signed. He had it all notarized the next morning over at a UPS store on South Church Street. Mentioned it to me afterward like it was nothing, an errand, barely worth noting. God forgive me, I slept well that night. I thought I'd finally handed the heaviest thing to someone steady enough to hold it. What I'd actually handed him was everything. If you've ever been so worn down that you signed something you didn't read, if you've ever trusted someone because you were simply too tired to do anything else, then you already know the door I walked through. And you already feel the cold air coming through it. Run the clock forward. 14 months, 5 a.m., medications. Elaine's good days, when she'd laugh at something from 30 years back like it happened yesterday, and I'd fall in love with her all over again in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. Her hard days, when she'd look at the kitchen she'd cooked 1,000 meals in and not know which cabinet held the cups. 14 months of holding yourself upright because she needs the one solid thing left in her world to stay solid. 14 months of lying awake in the dark doing the math. Is there enough? Will it hold? Will I hold? And then a Saturday came that split everything in two. My daughter Pam's place over in Smyrna. She's my older one. Got my stubbornness and her mother's laugh, which is a combination that makes her about the most formidable person I know. Her husband Roy is quiet. Works in logistics for a distribution company out near the airport. The kind of man who listens more than he talks and who, I've learned, notices a great deal more than he lets on. There was a cookout. Ribs, coleslaw, the grandkids running through the sprinklers in the backyard. Elaine was having a good evening, warm and present, sitting in the lawn chair with a glass of sweet tea, watching the kids the way she always watched them, like they were the best thing that had ever happened to the world. Derek was there, big and generous, laughing too loud at his own jokes, refilling plates before anyone asked, performing his devotion to an audience that had no reason to question it. Then Roy's hand found mine under the picnic table. He pressed his phone into my palm without looking at me. Not a glance. 4 words on the screen. Check your account now. And underneath, 3 more. Say nothing. Stay calm. I looked up at Roy. His jaw was set like poured concrete. His eyes were completely still. One slow nod. The kind that says, trust me. Don't ask. Just trust me. I opened my banking app under the edge of the table. I hadn't looked at this account in months. Derek handled the money. That was the arrangement. That was the deal I'd made. The balance on the screen was $9,340. I stared at it. There had been $310,000 in that account. 38 years of it. Every dollar of it set aside for one woman and one purpose. The memory care facility on Veterans Parkway that I'd driven out to twice on my own and never told a soul about. The good one with the enclosed garden and the staff who learned your person's name in the first week. $9,340. Derek was laughing across the yard. Elaine was smiling at the grandkids. The sprinklers were still going. The whole yard smelled like charcoal in summer. I pressed my hand flat against my chest. Felt my own heartbeat. Steady. Slower than I would have expected. I stood up. I said, "Roy, I think I need to sit somewhere quiet for a minute." He was beside me before I finished the sentence. He walked me around to the front of the house, to his truck, parked at the curb, away from the yard, away from Derek. And Derek, my sister's boy, the man I had wept with gratitude over, stood on my daughter's back porch and called out after me. "You all right, Uncle Gerald? I'll come check on you in a little while." I sat in the passenger seat of Roy's truck, and the first thought I had was not about me. It was about Elaine. That $310,000 was her net. The facility on Veterans Parkway. The private room I'd prayed about in the dark. The whole plan I'd built around the fear I never said aloud, that I would go first and leave her with nothing and no one. All of it gone. And the man who took it was still standing in the backyard, loading paper plates. Roy didn't drive me to a hospital. Didn't drive me to the police. He drove me to his office building on Industrial Boulevard, a squat beige building you'd drive past 100 times and never think twice about. The place was empty on a Saturday afternoon. Our shoes on the tile floor sounded too loud. He took me to a small conference room, closed the door, and sat across from me the way a doctor sits when what he's about to say can't be unsaid. "Roy," I said, "how long have you known?" "5 months," he said. I let that settle. I looked at him. The look on his face told me those 5 months had not been easy to carry. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" He folded his hands on the table. "Because Pam had to be completely certain before we came to you with her brother's name, and because I needed every door closed before you knew one was open." I understood him completely. In that moment I understood him more than I've understood most people in my life. Then he opened the folder. He started with the withdrawals. 13 months of them, always between $2,500 and $4,800, never once above the threshold that triggers a federal reporting requirement. Spread across irregular intervals, never the same week twice, never the same amount. Loose enough to look like normal account activity, careful enough to stay invisible. "This has a name," Roy said, sliding the first page across to me. "It's called structuring. It's a federal crime entirely separate from the theft itself." I looked at those transaction records laid out in a row. My nephew had robbed me with the patient discipline of a professional. The very patience I'd admired in him every time he sat with Elaine through a hard hour. He'd turned it around and aimed it at the account I'd spent my working life filling. If you've ever seen something you gave someone used as the very thing to undo you, you know the cold that moved through me right then. Then the pension. Derek had used the power of attorney I'd signed at my own kitchen table on the night I couldn't read my own name without squinting and asked the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System to redirect my monthly distribution into a secondary account he controlled. They processed it without a question. Why would they question it? The paperwork was clean. My boy had made sure of that. I didn't say anything. I just looked at the wall above Roy's head and did the arithmetic and felt something move through me that I still don't have a proper name for. Older than anger, colder than grief. Then Elaine's account. Roy slid one page toward me, and I knew from his face before I looked down that this one would land the hardest. Elaine had kept a small savings account her entire adult life. Her own money, the account she'd opened before we were even married, added to slowly across 40 years from birthday checks and Christmas money and the occasional small job she'd taken when the girls were in school. She rarely talked about it. It was just hers. A quiet little square of her own ground in a life where I handled most everything else. Emptied. Every cent, using her power of attorney. On a Thursday, a day I recognized because it was the Thursday she'd had a particularly hard afternoon, and I'd been with her through all of it, which meant I hadn't been watching anything else. Derek had chosen his window with a surgeon's precision. I put both hands flat on that conference room table and looked at them. Old hands. Hands that wired 3 counties for 38 years without a single failure. Hands that signed their name on a Wednesday night to the one thing that did. There's one more, Roy said. He slid the last page across. It was a beneficiary designation form. My signature was on it. I remembered the morning I saw it. Month 7. Elaine had been up twice in the night, and I was running on nothing. Derek showed up early with coffee and a short stack of papers and said, "Just routine stuff, Uncle Gerald, account maintenance, sign here, I've already handled the rest." I signed without reading a line. What I'd signed removed Pam and her children from my retirement account entirely and placed Derek as sole beneficiary. My own hand, my own pen, erasing my daughter and my grandchildren from everything I'd built. I did it myself. I just didn't know what I was doing. Roy wasn't finished. "There's something else you need to know," he said. And this is the part that changed everything. For the past several months, Derek had been making careful remarks to family members. At Patricia's birthday dinner, in the parking lot after church, on the phone with cousins. Things like, "Uncle Gerald isn't managing as well as he thinks he is. I worry about him. He's making decisions that don't make sense. I've been carrying more than the family realizes." An elder law attorney, Roy, had quietly consulted, recognized it immediately. Derek was laying the foundation for a conservatorship petition. If he could get a court to declare me legally incompetent, and he'd been patiently building that case in people's minds for months, he would be named my legal guardian. Every illegal thing he'd already done would become court-sanctioned. Everything I still owned would fall under his legal control. He wasn't only stealing from me, he was building a cage around me. One soft, worried comment at a time. Roy looked at me from across the table and said quietly, "What do you want to do?" Here is something they don't tell you about being 74 years old and sitting in an empty office on a Saturday afternoon with $9,000 to your name and the full weight of the truth pressing down on every bone you own. You have two roads. You can be loud. You can call your nephew this minute and say every word piled up in your chest since the moment you saw that number on a phone screen in your daughter's backyard. You can let the fire out. Or you can be something quieter, something colder, something that actually helps her. I thought about Elaine in the garden chair, watching the grandkids in the sprinklers. I thought about the facility on Veterans Parkway. I thought about what I was still trying to protect and what I would lose if I let my anger pick up the pen. "I want every door closed before he knows one is open," I said. "Not for me, for her first. Everything else takes a number and waits." Roy nodded once. He already had a plan. He'd spent 5 months building it. "I'll tell you something honest. The man my father raised, the younger version of me who'd squared up to foreman twice his size on job sites, I don't know that man could have sat still in that chair. I think he'd have driven straight to Cordell Lane and said every true and terrible thing right there in the driveway. But I'd learned by then, the hard way and the long way, what Elaine always knew. The fire feels right for about 90 seconds. It doesn't keep anyone warm after that. There's something nobody warns you about justice when it's real and it's personal. You spend your life watching it work out clean in movies and on television. The confrontation, the speech, the moment the guilty man's face finally falls. You think when your own turn comes, it'll feel like exhaling after years of holding your breath. What they don't show you is what it actually feels like when it's your own blood sitting across from you. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like amputation. Necessary. Correct. And something you will carry the scar of for the rest of your life. Monday morning, 9 o'clock, I was sitting across from an elder law attorney named Susan Pratt in an office on East Main Street in Murfreesboro. Roy had called ahead. She went through every page of that folder, the way a surgeon goes through a body. Systematic, unhurried, deciding what had to come out. By noon, every power of attorney Derek held over me and over Elaine was formally revoked, filed, processed, effective immediately. My nephew lost all legal access to both accounts before he sat down to his Monday lunch. He had no idea. By midweek, the beneficiary form was reversed through emergency proceedings. Pam and the grandchildren were restored. Derek was removed. He still had no idea. Roy's compliance contacts had already connected with a detective in the financial crimes unit, a woman named Detective Carla Morse. Roy told me later she said it was the cleanest private case file she'd received in 11 years. Roy just said thank you and meant it. That's who he is. Then Derek came by the house. He brought a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store. He sat with Elaine while she watched her program. He fixed a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen without being asked, came to find me afterward with that wide, familiar smile. "How you feeling, Uncle Gerald? You gave us a little scare Saturday." "Much better," I said. "Just the heat, I think. Getting old. You've got to slow down," he said, leaning against the counter, easy as a man who's never worried about anything. "I worry about you. Seriously." I looked at my nephew in my own kitchen, in the house Elaine picked out, in the light coming through the window she always loved in the late afternoon. I thought about $9,000 where a lifetime used to be. I thought about Elaine's quiet little account, 40 years of her own careful saving, gone in an afternoon while I was in the next room with her. I thought about the cage he was building around me, one thoughtful comment at a time. I said, "You know what, Derek, you're right. Starting right now, I'm going to pay very close attention to everything." He nodded, looked pleased. He had no idea what was already turning in the dark all around him. "I want to be honest with you about my nephew, because I promised myself I'd tell this true. I don't believe he started out deciding to destroy us. I think it started small. I think he told himself he was owed something for coming back, for giving up months of his life. I think he looked at that money sitting in an account and decided it would only disappear into care facilities anyway, and he was the one who actually showed up. So didn't that count for something? I think every withdrawal had a story he told himself, and every story made the next one a little easier to start. That's the part that frightens me more than anything. Not that he was monstrous, that he was ordinary, that he reasoned his way there one comfortable step at a time, the way people do. 2 Saturdays later, I called him in the morning. "Derek, I'm feeling so much better. Come for dinner this weekend here at the house. Bring something nice. We've got a lot to be grateful for." He showed up at 6:30 with an expensive bottle of red wine and his biggest smile. The table was set. Elaine was in her blue dress, having a fine evening, present and warm and funny in the way that used to stop me mid-sentence on an ordinary Wednesday. She told a story about a trip we took in 1989 that made Pam laugh in spite of everything she was worrying. Pam, who had spent 4 months holding her brother's betrayal in her chest while she sat across from him at Sunday dinners, who had covered for him and defended him and loved him past the point where most people would have stopped, because that was what family meant to her. She sat at that table and held it all together with nothing but love and whatever it is inside certain people that simply will not break. Roy sat beside her, quiet, steady, utterly invisible to anyone who didn't know what he'd done, which was everyone at that table but me. And Derek sat at the head of it and was everything he'd always performed: generous, warm, devoted. Topping off the glasses, drawing out Elaine's laughter, the man who'd come home for all the right reasons. The whole room smelled like pot roast and the candles Elaine always liked, and for a moment it almost felt like something that hadn't been destroyed. Then there was a knock at the front door. I stood up. I walked across my own floors, past the photographs on the hallway wall, through 37 years of this house, and I opened the door. 2 detectives. Plain clothes, paperwork in hand. Detective Morse introduced herself and her partner. Unhurried, professional, calm. I'd spoken with them Thursday. They knew exactly where they were and exactly who they'd come for. I heard Derek stop talking mid-sentence behind me. I stepped aside. The detectives walked in and I watched my nephew's face in the precise moment he understood what was happening. I want to be honest about this part because it matters more than the rest. His first instinct was not shame. His eyes moved fast across the room, to me, to Roy, to Pam, to the door, searching for something that wasn't there. There was no exit. Every door was closed. Pam stood up slowly. She'd been thinking about what she wanted to say for 2 weeks, had written it and cut it and stripped it down to the bone, and when the moment actually came, she found it simpler than anything she'd planned. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. "I need you to look at Mom before you leave this house, Derek." The room went silent. Derek looked at Elaine. Elaine looked back at her nephew with nothing in her face but pure, unclouded warmth. She didn't understand what was happening around her. She thought maybe he was heading out early after a nice dinner, the way he sometimes did. She lifted her hand and gave him the same small, cheerful wave she always gave him when he left. "You come back soon, sweetheart," she said softly. "This was so nice. Let that sit." Because in that moment, Elaine's condition did the cruelest, most merciful thing I have ever witnessed in my life. It protected him. She would never see her nephew through different eyes. Whatever was left of her memory would carry him gently. His name still clean and warm in there, untouched by any of this. He would never have to earn that. And he would never lose it. Pam spoke quiet and clear, and her voice did not waver once. She doesn't know what you did. Her mind is going to keep you safe from ever seeing her face change. You'll never have to watch her understand it. But I understand it. Dad understands it. And I need you to know that every withdrawal you made while he was up at 5 in the morning giving her medications, every paper you slid in front of him while he was running on nothing trying to keep her going, every single time you sat at this table and let him thank God for you, I know all of it. Every cent of it. And I'm going to spend whatever time I have making sure both of them are okay. Not because I have to. Because that is what it actually looks like when you love someone. They walked Derek out the front door of the house on Cordell Lane. And Elaine, my warm, my steady, my still here Elaine, watched him go from her chair at the dinner table and waved once more at the doorway, smiling the way she always smiled when a good evening was winding down and the people she loved had been fed and everything was fine. Derek pleaded guilty. The case Roy had spent 5 months building was too complete, too documented for any attorney to dismantle. Elder financial abuse, criminal fraud, federal structuring charges. He was sentenced to 4 years, and restitution was ordered. The money comes back slowly, in pieces, the way it was taken. Some of it won't come back at all. I've made my peace with that. I'm making it. Some days that's the most honest thing a man can say. But Elaine's care is protected. Susan Pratt found legal pathways I hadn't known existed. Emergency planning options that could still work even with the account gutted the way it was. The facility on Veterans Parkway is still within reach. Elaine is going to be all right. Not the plan I drew up, not the life I built toward, but all right. And right now, all right is everything to me. Here is what the last year and a half taught me, and I would hand it to you directly if I could reach through this and do it. The danger almost never looks like danger. It looks like relief. It looks like someone showing up at exactly the right moment and lifting the thing that was about to break you. And the mistake most of us make, the one I made, is believing that exhaustion is reason enough to stop reading before we sign. It is not. Not ever. Not once. So here is one thing I am asking you to do today, before you close this and go on with your evening. If there is anyone managing your accounts, your medications, your paperwork, anyone at all, even someone you would stake your life on, set up a way to see your own accounts on your own device that no one else controls. Not because you don't trust them, because trust and verification were never meant to replace each other. They were always meant to work together. And here's what I want you to sit with tonight, friends. If the person you built everything to protect was depending on a plan that someone else quietly dismantled while you were looking the other way, and if the only person who caught it was the quiet one that nobody noticed, what would you have done with that information? Would you have had the patience to wait? I barely did. I just knew Elaine needed me to find it. Type a 1 in the comments if you think I did right by going quiet and letting the law do what it does. Type a 2 if you'd have wanted me to say every word to his face the minute I saw that number on the screen. Type a 3 if you're not sure what you'd have done, because that is the most honest answer of all, and I respect it more than the other 2 combined. And tell me where in the world you're listening from, and what time it is where you are right now. I mean that. I read everyone. If this story reached you, if any part of it sat somewhere inside you and didn't fully let go, do an old electrician a kindness and hit subscribe, tap that like button, and let more people who need to hear this find their way to it. We tell real, raw, honest family stories here, and you being here is the only reason we get to keep telling them. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you truly. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined to create original content. Any resemblance to actual persons or events is coincidental. Gerald didn't just protect Elaine's future. He showed us that the deepest love isn't the loud kind. It's the one that gets up at 5 in the morning, reads every paper before signing, and chooses patience over pride when everything inside you wants to burn. If someone quiet is standing beside you right now, steady and easy to overlook, look again. That person might be holding more than you know. A small note for you. This story was created and fictionalized by AI, crafted to bring you a meaningful moment of entertainment while leaving behind something worth carrying a small, useful light for the road ahead.